I want to share with you an experience which I had in June. I was in Vienna in June. There was a Beethoven symposium there, which was very interesting. And just before the symposium opened, I met a man who struck me immediately. He turned out to be a professor of Romance languages at the University of Vienna, now retired. He is a secular priest, and in a way some similarities with Liszt insofar he also has something slightly Mephistophelian about him. And as he also is interested in music, he is editor of the literary part of the Denkmäler der Tonkunst, volume 90 and 91. 90 dealing with court composers of one of the Habsburgs in the 16th century, madrigals, and he revised the texts and tried to establish where they originated from. And you find this in the Monuments of Music in Austria. We learned from his introduction that the word, the policy that we have of an insurance, comes from the handbills that were handed out with texts of madrigals in the 16th century. These were called police, and that is handbills that were handed out, and that is the origin of the word policy. And then in volume 91 he has an opera by Cavalli, for which by Caldara, by Antonio Caldara, Daphne, for which he revised the text and made a German translation. He seems to be a great scholar in the field of Romance literature, and I got his book on Dante, which we have in the university library. It was published in Vienna in 1946, and so he must have concluded it during the worst part of the Second World War. And I find, now I'm not a Dante scholar at all, and you know you have to read a library of Dante criticism in order to enable you to talk with any kind of intelligence about it, but I was immensely struck by this work. You know that Dante, of course, can be interpreted and has been interpreted in all sorts of ways. He can be taken as a great poet, he can be taken as a theologian, he can be taken as a guide for spiritual catharsis, he can be taken as a heretic, he can be taken as a socialist, and he has been taken as a representative of early capitalism. There's a book, Dante Vremya, which came out in Leningrad in 1965, and that is exactly what this man claims Dante was. So you can take Dante in many ways. This book by Robert Yohn is the man's name, Dr. Robert Yohn, has a thesis which struck me immensely, and forgive me for deviating a little bit from Liszt, and I can touch upon the things only very, very briefly, but very briefly, this is his thesis. Beatrice is accepted usually by the critic as not being the 9-year-old girl whom Dante met at the age of 9 and with whom supposedly he fell in love, and who later on married a man by the name of Portinari and had several children from him, and while Dante also married and had 2 sons and at least 1 daughter. And if Dante, time and again throughout his poetry, returns to Beatrice, she is to be taken probably as one of these medieval romance kind of love figures, or she is to be taken as a symbolic figure for something or other. Usually she is taken as a symbolic figure representing divine grace or the church or salvation or whatnot. Now, this man has an entirely different theory. His theory is this, that while the Divine Comedy is all sorts of things, of other things, he does not by any means dispute that, it is also, in a way, a political tract. Let me back this up as best I know how to. You may know that at the time of Dante's maturity there was a chivalrous organization. In fact, there were 3 chivalrous organizations. The Knights of St. John, the Teutonic Knights, and the Knights of the Temple. The Knights of the Temple were founded in 1109, and they were called Knights of the Temple because their mother house in Jerusalem was at the location where the Temple of Solomon had been located. They were very close to the Cistercian monks. The founder of the order of the Cistercians was Bernard of Clairvaux. Just on the sides, the colors of the Knights of the Temple were white and red, and these are the colors with which Beatrice always appears in the Divine Comedy. The Knights of the Temple, as you also may know from history, were under the immediate jurisdiction of the Pope, not of the bishops, and they had a third order of confraternities, as the Catholic Church orders very often have. They became immensely rich by gifts from emperors and so on. They had, at the height of their power, 9,000 houses. One of them was the Temple in London, which is now the seat of all the lawyers in London. They had 9,000 houses of this kind, and in 1 year alone, they had an income of 57 million gold francs. King Philip the Fair of France was in financial trouble and very jealous of anybody else who had money. And the Knights of the Temple had, and that is undoubted, deteriorated. They were no longer fighting very much in the Holy Land. In fact, they were probably even responsible for the failure of one of the Crusades. I think it was the fifth. And so Philip the Fair used a bishop and a Florentine bank, Nofo Dei by name, to accuse the Temple Knights of all sorts of crimes. Embezzlement was the least of these crimes. They ranged anywhere from black masses to anything you want to dream up. The main point was probably to get hold of their wealth. The Pope resisted for some time, but then gave in, and on one day, by good organization, on October 1307, about 15,000 Templars were arrested, all in one fell swoop in France. And 200 of them testified as witnesses under slight pressure, as was customary at the time, that all the accusations were true. And on May the 12th and 19th, 1310, 58 of them were burned at the stake, while many of them were able to flee or to go underground. By the way, it is interesting, and again something I cannot check, but this same man says that 200 fled to Scotland. Among them a learned priest, Peter of Bologna, and they found shelter by Robert Bruce, who was then the regent of Scotland. And there is a story that connects this group with the foundation of the Scottish Freemasonry. And even today, in the ritual of initiation, the highest grade, the Knight Kadosh of the Scottish Rite, is confronted by a picture of a skeleton with the banner of the Knights of the Temple in its bony hands and a poignard, what do you call it, a dagger. That is to serve as a warning to the Freemasons against the treachery that may lurk and try to ruin them. Anyway, this was an event of major proportions at the time of Dante. And it is, I don't know to what to compare it. It would be like accusing, I don't know, the AFL or the American Legion or something of crimes, unimaginable crimes, and arresting them all and burning them at the stake. Anyway, it must have been a most shattering experience. And Dr. Young claims that Dante, who had theological training, no doubt, was a member of a confraternity, of one of these third orders of the Templars, and he finds hundreds, literally hundreds, and if not thousands, of very, for me at least, very convincing proofs that partly the Divine Comedy is a defense, and a secret defense. Of course, it could not come out openly, a symbolic hiding of a defense of the Knights Templar and all they stood for. If somebody is interested, I have a few examples here that I copied out. Time doesn't permit me to go into detail. We want to go to the choral concert. Let me assure you, it is an amazing amount of data that he marshals. The conclusion that I want to reach is that if this whole theory is true, then Beatrice in the Divine Comedy is not a pedantic woman who represents theology, but she is that ideal of love of God in the Neoplatonic sense, of the eros, of divine love, of caritas, of whatever you want to call it, which the Templars had received from the East, originally from the Neoplatonists, Plotin, and so on. Through the Arabs, the Templars were very much in touch with Eastern thinking, which they had received from there and which she personified. So if this is true, and if Beatrice is really the ideal of the Neoplatonic kind of love of God for mankind, which permeates the whole universe, then Liszt naively and intuitively has grasped correctly what Dante said in his Divine Comedy, that Beatrice is not a representative of theology in the accepted sense, and he was then 600 years ahead of scholarship, because scholarship is only now, at least tentatively, coming to a conclusion that Beatrice in the Divine Comedy is what Liszt calls the woman as she should be, a venerable figure and a figure of love who rules the male not by dissertations but by her very being. Thank you very much.